Hi everyone, this video is about critical writing and you might be wondering why this topic has to be addressed as a video. There are a number of reasons because when we look at how we assess the knowledge of adults when they earn either diploma, higher diploma, degree, master's or PhD qualification, there is a method of assessing your knowledge. So it can be either test within limited time, it could be practicals, it could be some designing activities, or it could be writing assignments, right? So sometimes there are time restrictions. So most of the students do not like exams because they think exams are creating stress and anxiety and they couldn't perform very well. So they select the pathway of writing assignments to earn a qualification. So that's good. Now we need to look at why critical writing is necessary in assessing knowledge based on written assessments. That's the question we need to ask. So what kind of writing is involved? And that's where we are going to see what are the elements that you need to have in your assessment to be graded as a pass or a merit or a distinction, right? So that's what we are going to do here. Critical reading is necessary for Australian qualification framework level 5, 4, 5 upwards and as well as employable skills. Now before writing critically, we need to read critically and then think critically. So you will find this critical writing is a process based on critical reading and then thinking. So it is different from the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the programming or any other intelligence types. We call this as a natural intelligence. So to measure knowledge, you'll find it should be either written test or exams, practical test, written assignments, online tests, or building models, or designing website plan, or drawing a 3D structure and advertisement. And these are all methods to measure your knowledge, right? Now, why we need to focus on critical writing is the question. So this is objectives. Let's see why. So you know that, as I said, your knowledge, most of the diplomas and higher diplomas, the knowledge is measured through written assessment task, right? That is AQF level 5 and onwards. I gave the web link. Another one important factor is employable skills. What employable skills? That is the reasoning power, writing and telling an audience. This is how you derived your conclusion based on valid information, and what you say is credible, right? It does not have fallacies, errors, right? It is believable. Then the next one important factor is Australian core skills framework standards need to be taken in. This is similar to my critical reading video. Finally, you need to find out why you need to study. You visit this website, the adult writing skills, expected levels. These links would give you the reality, right? So therefore, this is an important area we all need to look at. Now, as I said in my critical reading video, there is a connection between critical writing, critical thinking, and critical reading. Why? Because they are like members of the same family, kind of. Sometimes members of the same family would not go together, but these are going together because they have the same characteristic features. Okay. Now the definitions, when I was looking for, I found one. This is from Smith, 2013. What Smith says is, critical writing is writing which evaluates and analyzes more than one source in order to develop an argument. Based on all the material I read, at the end of the presentation, my definition was found, but I thought of giving you in the beginning. But as a process, it was found at the very end. So my definition for critical writing is, it is writing to develop informed opinion of a valid argument, to reach conclusions or to make decisions through a process of analysis, evaluation, and justification by referring to credible sources or current literature. That's my definition. So sometimes critical thinking can be seen as getting ideas, theories, assumptions, in the end to search for validity of information. Right? So we need to look at main steps of critical thinking. That's where we are right now. The next what you need to look at is getting the assignment and read. Pinpoint the action verbs there. Is this asking you to write an essay? Or is it asking you to list a couple of items? Or is it asking you to describe something? Or is it asking you to examine or research? Or is it asking to analyze some subjects, some concepts, or discuss, evaluate, or justify? What is it asking from you? So based on that, you need to decide what my writing should be. So that's why we are going to look at the Bloom's taxonomy, because the Bloom's taxonomy has clear 6 levels. From the bottom, it's remembering, understanding, and then it progresses applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. The top 3 are called higher order thinking skills. The bottom 3 are low order thinking skills. So we need to look at this Bloom's taxonomy. The reason is critical writing is part of critical thinking, and also your brain is processing this information. So the brain processing is called cognitive skills. So Bloom's taxonomy is based on your cognitive ability. That means the brain's processing ability. So that's a fair chance. So let's look at the connection between critical thinking and writing. First, you need, whatever the information you gathered, you need to analyze. That's asking questions on what you read, and research. Research meaning finding information from reliable sources, not Wikipedia. Then you need to come up with your reasoning, right? Is it valid? How can I make it true? How can I make it lack of fallacies? So, and what evidence can I brought forward? Then you need to, for the reasoning, please refer WikiHow. There are 9 steps involved. That's fantastic. Then the next stage is, in your head, you need to evaluate, making judgments of what you read, right? This is argument for and against. Kind of your brain is involved in a debate, looking at strengths and weaknesses of the argument, right? And you are the one arguing for both sides. It really lets your brain to think. And then you need to develop your arguments in a row. That means it has to have an audit trail, right? All reasons are coming together to give your opinion in the end. Where do you stand? Okay? Now you look at that, these last 2 stages. This is evaluate, develop. That area is problem solving and decision making area. Remember that. So critical thinking is, it's not planning just to simply describe or summarize information. It's more than that. And remember it. Okay? The next you need to ask, before writing critically, I should do some thinking. So what kind of thinking is that? Then you might find it should be critical thinking. So before critical thinking, I need to read some information. So that comes back to critical reading. That was my previous video. So then it is crystal clear these 3 are interconnected. The 3 elements: critical reading, critical thinking, and ending up with critical writing. So that makes sense. Now we need to look at the connection between critical thinking and critical writing. If you look at that, this slide was extracted from my critical reading presentation on the 10th January, which has the first 2 layers, remembering and understanding of Bloom's taxonomy, and then the next 4 layers. But you know that H for higher order, L for lower order thinking. Now here I did highlight the areas involved in critical reading at that point. I also did say that is non-critical readers, but I pointed out the fact that these are the two areas responsible for critical thinking, right? Critical thinking elements were clearly highlighted at that point. Now, what I needed to do here is to identify where critical writing is. So what I did was, I found to write critically, you need to go through almost all the stages: understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and then finally create, right? So create stage can be not visible, but it's you coming up with your own argument. Okay, so that's something new. That is what is expected. Now, when you look at that, critical writing and critical thinking, so these two stages, evaluation, analyzing, is touching both areas. So you could see that in your brain is not divided into, okay, this side is for thinking, this side is for writing, and that side is for reading, right? So your brain is constantly processing this information. So this is the connection. To tell the connection, the best tool is to use Bloom's taxonomy, okay? And we are done with that. Okay, now we are in the middle of the topic, somewhat. So we need to look at what are the writing styles we know. The common writing styles are descriptive writing, essay writing, analytical writing, technical writing, and then this word comes as critical writing. You must have heard academic writing. Remember that academic writing is underpinned by critical writing. Right? So leisure writing is no longer considered in this video, because we are not writing, it's not part of leisure writing that gives you the higher education qualification or the diploma. It is the critical writing. So therefore, this is directly focusing on critical writing. Let's see what happens next. We'll look at how to distinguish critical writers against descriptive writers. We are not looking at leisure writing here. That's also writing novels or writing to blogs. So there are two groups of writers here among students, right? Some of them are called descriptive writers. The others are called critical writers. You need to find out which group you belong to based on these features. Let's get one by one to see who belongs to which group. Right. So the descriptive writers, they like stating or indicating what happens when critical writers are telling significant points of a scenario, right, by identifying clues outside the information given. Number two, the descriptive writers, they love stating what something looks like. But the critical writer, what the critical writers do, they evaluate, examine the strengths and weaknesses of an argument or a fact, right? So it's a difference. The third difference is the descriptive writers, they are so good at describing the same thing. So it is writing the same in their own words, right? So not a new idea coming up. But the critical writers, they evaluate meaning looking strengths and weaknesses of information, do some research, and then compare, and then discussing further. So that's more broad. The fourth difference is the descriptive writers, they love listing the different interpretations, without referring to any information source, just pretending it's all my own, it's my knowledge. It clearly shows it's dishonesty, because it could be dishonesty or writing a personal story, right? Personal opinion. But the critical writers, they compare or they contrast each concept and which one is the most relevant part for the assessment, and they would continue to do research based on their findings, right? Those are four differences. Let's look the next. The fifth difference is the descriptive writers write paragraphs. They keep writing on and on and on of concepts, and they love throwing quotes without any analyzing. They say something and bringing a quote. So the way they write, you can convert man into a woman and vice versa because someone says so. So there is no valid information bringing 5, 6 sources to say this is my argument. No such thing. Writing a personal story and throwing a quote, there is no validity on that quote. But the critical writers, they are developing their argument. They are clearly showing the links between argument. They would bring quotes if necessary to prove the case. The other difference of descriptive writing is the reasons for the arguments are not supported. This is what I said. Sources are not indicated. There is no sequence or logical trail of reasoning. So as opposed to descriptive writers, the critical writers, they're good at reasoning for each argument, and they are supported with valid sources, and there is a logical trail of reasoning. So the seventh difference of descriptive writer is they are suggesting and offering conclusions, without having any reference, without building an argument. They're so good at writing a conclusion. We call it sweeping conclusions coming from nowhere. So telling the marker or the reader to accept what that person says, right? It's unjustified arguments. The reader is not convinced. Remember, we call it sweeping conclusions. But the critical writers, they are drawing well-defined conclusions referring to their valid analysis and valid evaluation, convincing the reader. I use my argument based on these resources. And sometimes they would say the weaknesses of their argument also. It doesn't mean you are weak, but just to highlight. And the eighth difference of descriptive writers is they provide web links or URL just to pretend that they have done wide research, just the indication, but in reality, no such thing. But the critical writer clearly use citation or in-text referencing for each idea taken, not each paragraph, each idea, and then give the details under a list of references. Now you have got these two sides. Which group you belong to? It's up to you to decide, but just be honest, okay? Because honesty is the best policy. Now we are going to look at how critical thinking is applied to critical writing. There are 4 stages to go through, right? First stage is, does the question ask this question from yourself. Does the question is asking me to list or summarize or describe something? The next stage, ask, does the question ask me to analyze, create, evaluate, or suggest my opinion or the judgment? The third stage is, have I included evidence and support? That means citation or in the form of in-text referencing by giving list of references to show the marker or the reader, I have done my part. My arguments are based on valid resources, valid arguments, right? And therefore, I have developed critical writing. The last stage, you ask, have I considered different sides of an argument with supporting evidence to reach conclusions? Don't need to believe everything what you read. Maybe this can be true, but that resource says it is not the case. You need to say that, okay? So the question is, you have to ask yourself, why do I need critical writing? That's the overarching question. Because number 2, 3, 4 of this arrow here are the expectations of Australian qualification framework level 4 to 10. Okay, and that is the reason. So I hope I gave you the reason very clearly. Right. Next, what I'm going to focus on is to give you the tool to test whether the written assignment has critical writing elements. So once you complete the assignment, get this list and put ticks for the things that you have done. So the things that you haven't done, put crosses. So the ones you put crosses, you need to revisit and then address those areas. So that means you are learning by yourself. And that's what adult learning is all about. Okay. Now let's look at some samples, because we have talked about critical writing, but the points are raised. But to get the picture clearly, I felt it is necessary to show you some samples so that you know what I say, right? So first one, what we are going to do is we are going to see sample by sample, and then we are going to test this to see whether that example is a piece of critical writing or not. Let's get into example 1. Right? So this example 1 is, when we read it, you can find here, it's a project. It's a project management assignment. It's writing this project closing the gap. Let's do the first sentence. Project closing the gap has been designed, blah, blah, blah. It says there's no citations, no in-text references, scrolling down, 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 numbers there. So, and further down, here we go. So, it looks to me, there is no supporting evidence to continue with this writing, right? So let's go back and test this thing. How do we test? Here we are. Let's ask the first question. Is it a personal opinion? And you saw that it looks like, right? I would say yes. Then, are those valid statements or arguments supported by credible resources? Out of yes or no? Obviously it is no. Are those arguments 100% true? How do I know whether 100% true? Because the writer has not proven that, right? So marker is stranded, and shocking because cannot decide. Number 4, are those arguments free of fallacies? How do we know whether there is a fallacy or not? If it is not true, there could be number of fallacies, errors. Number 5, has the writer convinced the marker? Analytical, evaluatory, and decision-making skills. Well, obviously, if you cannot build up an argument without having firm background supporting evidence. So that is also no. Number 6, is the reasoning logical? Reasoning, if I go back and read, I read this information, it's so much jargon and it's not flowing well, and there are lots of flaws, right? So I would say no for that. Then, what resources have been used to develop each argument? Absolutely nothing. So it's a big no. Right. So that's the first example. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is get into example 2. We'll have a look how example 2 writing is going to be. Here in this case, just look at this question. Okay, a question is written in red. The question is asked, the expectation is the learner has analyzed information. I have underlined analyzed information by how? Reviewing the new company application form against the current membership database and identified new fields for inclusion in the membership database. Okay. Then the other one is learner has used the company template to create. I have underlined that, create a report for the operations director, detailing in what is required. Here the answer. Let's look at the answer. It says here, in my research, I did find. What research? Within brackets need to say, who are they? The way how the sentence is written, it could be 5 or 6 research papers. If it is so, obviously I expect those in text referencing for 5, 6 different authors, right? There's no such thing. So how do I know whether the student has done a research? This sentence is not convincing me, right? It says in my research, but the data is not given. So if you look at the question, learner has analyzed. Analysis meaning breaking information into pieces, mixing pieces together, finding patterns, to see what surfaces from that information, and then comment on those patterns. That's what analysis. Can you see whether there is any analysis here? Finding pieces, mixing, justifying. There is no such thing. And then it says create a report. Report meaning a report of professional standards. It has, it should be a self-explanatory, right? So let's see, there is self-explanatory, having a summary, having an introduction, and then the findings and the analysis, and then the data, then evaluation, discussion, conclusion, finally recommendations. No such thing there. So there is no report either. It says differences noted here, proposed alterations. That's it. That's the report. So this has no valid information at all. Now let's go back and do our test to decide how far it's correct. Okay. Now, is it a personal opinion? Yes, it is. Are those valid statements supported by credible resources? There are no valid resources. So it's no. Are those arguments 100% true? We cannot say the truth of it because it was not developed based on credible resources, right? So marker cannot decide that. Marker was not proven. Arguments free of fallacy, there can be 100 fallacies there because it is not convincing the reader. Has the writer convinced the marker? Analytical, evaluated, decision making. Look, yes, I pointed out there was absolutely no analysis. There was no analysis. Evaluation meaning finding strengths and weaknesses of what came out of the analysis. There was no such thing. But the decision, some kind of a decision was closer, but it was not there either. The reasoning is completely illogical. That means not logical. Resources have been used to develop argument? No such thing. Okay? So that cannot be called as a critical piece of writing. Let's look at example 3, and now you can remember example 1 and 2 both, right? Based on that, we are looking at example 3. Now this example 3 is showing the purpose of this report. It's a summary. Summary has this kind of, can you see in text referencing? But keep in mind, summaries, you should never ever write in text referencing for summary. Summary is purely your thinking, right? That's an error here, right? It's technically wrong. Then we have looking at the writing here, introduction. Can you see introduction? It's building introduction by referring resources used. And here, if you look at these resources, it says 2001 B and A. That means to write down the whole thing, only 2 types of resources are used, not more. So the argument is built on just 2 types of resources, okay? When looking at the resources, then the findings, again referring to these 2 resources, right? That's it. Then after that all gone, it is bringing suggestions. Can you see now? There is, what it says is, if you look at here, there are findings. Findings were not analyzed, not discussed, not evaluated, and all of a sudden jumping into suggestions, right? These are called sweeping suggestions, right? It started somewhere, right method, but it is not continuing. Now the suggestions, when you suggest something, you have to talk those resources. Those are given, the study resources given to students. They are not additional resources. So you cannot build up an argument based on what was given to you alone. And bring suggestions, to suggest why do you bring a different source. Okay, this is got some clue of how to use in-text referencing, but that's all. And then look at the suggestions and conclusions. Suggestions is kind of recommendations, right? Recommendation should be after the conclusion. So there are a lot of technical errors here in this report. So suggestions, you cannot suggest by referring to resources, right? Because that's where, you use resources for analysis, evaluation, and discussion. After that point, don't use anything, right? And this conclusion shouldn't have this, right? There are a lot of technical issues, but the references are listed underneath, but the last reference is not for, yeah, they are APA referencing style. Now let's go back to the test and find out personal opinion. Not really the beginning, but towards the end it is wobbly. This valid statement, argument supported by credible resources, it's kind of 30%, 40% yes, and 50-60% no. Arguments 100% true, definitely not 100% true. As I said, there were a lot of technical issues. Arguments free, there can be fallacies there, right? Has the right to convince the marker analytical skills? Definitely no analytical skills, no evaluatory skills. They are called sweeping suggestions, right? There is nothing left in between, straight away jumping to suggestions. The reasoning is not logical because of that. So what resources have been used? Some of them are there. So on a scale of critical writing test, if I put marks out of 10, unlike the first two pieces, this one you get more marks, meaning 3 out of 10 kind of, not more than that, 3 or 4, but definitely not 5 or above. So that means they are not very good pieces. Okay, let's get into the next slide. Let's look at a different example here and see whether it's going to pass the critical writing test. Okay, so I hope you could remember the first 3 pieces. Now this piece of writing is about leadership, right? So I have adapted this from this website. It says, if you look at here leadership, it says here, Brown, the author maintains that leadership is, and the writer is writing, Brown is maintaining. Then what was said is confirmed by another source. Then there was another quote bringing up here, this plan, this sentence is, the third one is writer's own view. That's fine based on first 2. That's okay. Then the bringing Smith 2001 explains, bringing another author. Okay, and then bring the fourth one, Jones argues. Okay, now the writer uses 4 resources. After using 4 resources, the writer is not comparing these. What are the similarities between these authors and what are the differences? If there are no similarities, obviously there must be differences. But writer is not doing anything, and writer is jumping into in my own experience. Hang on. What experience? Hang on, wait a minute. Take a step backward. You bring what were the similarities, what were the differences, and how they are related to the leadership topic. Topic is leadership. Before coming up with your experience. Okay? So can you see now? So jumping into my experience and then saying it is confirmed by somebody. Look at the disconnection here. Right? Bringing 4 authors, there is no comparison between what the authors say and the writer says writer's opinion and confirming that. So there is a huge hole here, right? So, and then we are going to test this thing. So when we go to the testing, you could find personal opinion, not really, it was starting to build. Some valid statements are there. There are some errors, as I said here. The writer is simply jumping, right, into a conclusion. There are a number of fallacies. Writer convinced the marker analytical? Definitely no analytical. There is no evaluation. But writer has made a decision. Those are called sweeping decisions. Reasoning is not logical, but compared to the first, second, third, the 3, 4, the 3 samples, I could get the highest mark here. Still, 4.5 is the highest. It cannot go to 5 out of 10 because there are issues. Okay, what resources? Yes, there are some resources used. Now, having seen that, let's get into another example. Okay, and then we'll see whether this one is making. Now, look at here. Now, this is about here. This is about the leadership. It says the writer starts with a sentence, just the umbrella sentence. A review of the available literature. a review, meaning going through that, reading papers, provides a wealth of examples of authors advocating leadership as an essential quality in nursing. Then Greiter is giving, for example, Shackleton 1950 says what, right? Then he says, however, more recently, authors have moved, bringing two authors, 2001, 2002, that's fine. But the thing is, those two, similarities bringing there. Now, then it is proving these qualities are also an integral part, meaning bringing another author to support that view. Then getting into the new paragraph, and it says here, charisma appears to be a complex phenomenon to define. And it's a writer's word because writer felt that has to write charisma is very complex. Why? Why? It's giving answers. Why? The analysis is answering the why, the how, and what if questions. Right? So to support that, it says David suggests this. Then, however, other authors say what? Right? And then coming up with a comment. Then the next paragraph. It appears problematic, therefore, to identify exactly how charisma can be. It shows there's a charisma, it's clearly defined, there are issues here. So then bringing the different authors here and then arguing, charisma, because charisma started from this first paragraph. And then it is continuing because that's the bottleneck, right? So the writer is going to explain that thing one by one with supporting evidence. It says John argues, okay, and then it brings to another author. So again, it's coming back to charisma. So you could see that charisma in transformational leadership is the key the writer is going to say here, right? So it is supported by a number of different authors, and there is a lot of analysis going on, evaluating, finding strengths and weaknesses of the arguments, right? Let's look at this one. How different is this piece of writing? The issue is explored more depth compared to the first four. And in this, student constantly tries to find answers in the literature, particularly finding different definitions and interpretations of the key issue, what? Charisma in transformational leadership. What happened was, once the literature is presented, the student puts his or her own spin interpretation into that. And then, can you see that personal thoughts and reflections are always followed up by attempts to find supporting evidence, right? Different authors supporting. The complexity of the issue, recognize it was going on and it was clear 3-4 paragraphs are going through that, right? So things are not, things are presented simplistically. The gray areas are clearly noted. It says, if you look at the gray areas, uncertain areas, it says here, look at this sentence here. It appears, not 100% certain, it appears, this is diluted, right? Little gray, not very certain, okay? And here, the student's voice is heard throughout, trying to make sense of what student has read and comparing it with what has experienced, okay? So, and then going to the list of references. So that was not a personal opinion because it's purely based on literature. Literature meaning research, the writing or the sources that wrote about the topic. We call it literature, okay? There are lots of valid statements. A lot of the truth is quite a lot there. Very few fallacies I would find. Yes, writer convinced the marker it is analytical, it's evaluatory and decision making. Reasoning is logical mostly. So this is the best piece of sample, I could say that, right? So, and now you saw 5 examples. I believe this will really help you to identify what kind of writing is critical. The 5th one is giving more marks. If I put marks here, I would give 8, 9 out of 10 for the last sample 5. Okay, now it's almost the end of the topic. The next one you'll be looking at do's and don'ts of critical writing. There's a huge list for you to comply with. Have a look. I'll give you this link, but for my presentation, I have extracted and modified some information based on my experience with you, right? So remember that when once you complete your writing, it should be grammatically correct, and also it is free of any slangs, right? Because this is called academic writing. So academia, we do not use any slangs. Okay, so let's go through the process. Right. The next part we are going to look at is the do's and don'ts of critical writing. There's a whole huge list, but of that whole list, this was extracted from another source, but I have adapted that, right? So if you look at the source here, the source has a number of questions under do's and don'ts. So I'll come back to that once I show you the information, right? So what I did was, this was adapted from this university website, and it says the do's. What questions are there? It says here, answer the question, right? Keep referring back to the title. That's something you have to do, but don't forget the title, right? And the next one is contextualize do's, under do's. That means give some background information, okay? So what you shouldn't do is, don't tell the whole story starting from the Big Bang and including everything you heard, right? So another do is outline, summarize briefly, the beginning. But what you shouldn't do is, don't describe too much details at the very beginning, right? And the next do is define your terms or problems so that the reader understands that, right? So what you shouldn't do is beating around the bush. That means just going circles and circles. So you shouldn't do that. That's called tiptoeing around the issue. So you shouldn't do that, okay? Now, how? So in this case, the how questions are under do's, show the process in a logical order. But what you shouldn't do is mix up or jargon or muddling everything together, right? So like that, these how questions, and then why, then how and why. So we are going to look at this whenever you want, ask me so that I could send this attachment to you, right? So there are a lot of areas that you are focusing, and it has do's and don'ts, okay? Now, as a summary, the first thing is you need to find out what is that you got to write in capital. So what area there are do's and don'ts. Then the next one is how is the process. There are do's, don'ts. Then I'm just reminding reliable sources here. Then we have how and why. Why is analytical part, answering questions, breaking into pieces, looking at the information, and then making, similarities, differences, patterns, try to find out what emerges. So how and why, this area there are do's and don'ts. Then how is necessary for you to develop argument based on supporting evidence. So then the why is the analysis, evaluate, discussion, right? There are do's and don'ts. Then why is ending up with what if. Once you find, analyze, what if is, you have to have the ability to predict what should be the next. That's what if. So this is what if alone, without why. Then in the end, after reading it, you feel, so what? So what meaning? You need to say the judgment or your conclusion. And then what's next? Obviously, it is recommendation. So those are the areas. There are do's and don'ts, as I said, is a huge list. Okay. Now, the other important areas for this is, just to put it here, I thought, think of the whole writing process. That's important. And then citing text evidence during critical writing is important. Why we do that? Because writing level required for Australian qualification framework. That is the purpose. And don't forget language literacy and numeracy skills as well, right? So plus Australian core skills framework skills also necessary to look at. In the end, ending up with employable skills. What are the employable skills? Your reasoning power, you have the ability to write, and then you can make decisions. So those are the gains that you have. Okay? Right, we are done. So this is a sample, this is some sample of this explanation to get a better grade. What it says is, material straight from the internet or quoted from another publication is not proof of understanding. Right? I have seen students simply throwing quotes. It doesn't show the understanding. Quote is used once you develop an argument based on resources and once analyzed, once evaluate, once discussed. You really need to prove something. At that point, you bring a quote in and say, yes, this one says that. That's fine. But other than that, just don't throw quotes, because in the end, so why do I bother? Who said what? You are telling that person said this, X said this, Y said this, Z said this. So what? What do you say? And that's the question. Now, mapping, you can use it for critical writing, what areas you need to jot down. Okay, that is also important. Then finally, we have a self-assessment tool here. Okay, what you should do is you take all of this vocabulary and put a tick at the end of your writing to see how many areas you have addressed. Okay, so this is I call critical writing self-assessment tool. And here we got questions. Okay, so there can be number of questions in your brain. So you need to ask questions and you write down what the questions are, right? So that's all I wanted to say for this critical writing.